Okay, so I will now give the floor to Holger Dieterich. Holger is member of the board of a very important organization in Germany, based in Berlin. Social Heroes is the English translation of their name, which is Sozialhelden. Die Sozialhelden, the Social Heroes, is an organization which was founded in 2004 and whose aim is to raise awareness among people and companies to consider people with disabilities as a target group. The whole philosophy is based under the idea that people are not hindered by their conditions, but they are hindered by the society and by the barriers that society usually puts in our daily life, in their daily life. Holger, I think your seminar, your contribution is very important in our project. So I will give you the floor. The time is around 1.5 hours. If you need, we can make a pause. But I know that you have prepared a very interactive program, so feel free to decide whether to make a pause or not. And we are here to help you.
Thank you, Giovanni.
Thank you.
I clicked excited, and I'm happy that I'm excited and you're curious to hear. I need to be able to share my screen. Can somebody please give me the permission?
Yes.
And so before I start, I can already, Giovanni asked me to make it more interactive. So what I will do is I have some, let me quickly share my screen. So you should be able to see my screen now. It's all red and it reads accessible digital communication. So that's the topic of today. But before I start, I have a small poll which you can take. I've just posted the link in the chat, but you can also go to slido.com and type in the number 290. And so, speaking of accessible digital communication, the whole topic today will be about disability, accessibility, digital accessibility, and I'm asking you all, how confident do you feel about the topic of disability and accessibility? So I give you a second. I see 8 people already give a reply, and you can see in real time on the screen now what you're typing. And I will do so. This is the only link you will need. I will ask you to interact more often here. So keep the browser window open. And I see 30 people already participated, which is very great. I give you some more because people are coming in. And happy to see that you do feel confident about the topic already, pretty much. So the average score is 6. I have these emojis, it's like 1 to 10. And I keep on rambling a bit because I still see people are voting. So 47 have voted, and the curve is right in the middle, basically. So people feel pretty confident. It's like this emoji, the happy emoji, not too excited, but not too sad. And somebody is drawing here. Manuela, can you please stop drawing on the screen? I didn't know that was possible. Yeah, so it's happy to see that you're doing these things. I have also yeah, so my job is basically to push this up and to the right to more happy emojis so that you feel even more confident about accessible digital communication. So when you make digital products like websites, apps, videos, audio, that you think more about like how this might work for everyone, and also for people with disabilities. I come to the next question. So if you hear the word accessibility, what keywords come to mind? And now you have the option to just type in 1 or 2 words. And they should then show up here. the people are typing. I'll give you a moment. Also, you can type in more than one, I think. And so I think also about digital accessibility. Maybe you have used some things in the past on your phone or on your computer. So 30 people already replied. And now I see a word cloud here. I will describe this quickly. And the biggest word is inclusion and easy and equality, understandable. And I see lots of smaller words like how to help blind people, thoughtfulness, flexibility, full equals, empathy, support. I love to see that these are words about encountering people, like being together. And since you are artists, digital artists, that's not a surprise. But what I usually get here is sometimes technical specifications and stuff like that. And it's really cool to see that you don't do this so much here. I see some people have experience, like alternative text, for example, is something which we will cover, and fonts and color blindness and things like this. And yeah, ease of access, subtitles is one. And yeah, it's really great to see this so diverse. So onto a small quiz of 3 questions, and then you are a bit relieved, and I will tell a little stories, So next thing is join the quiz. So what do you think? How many people have a disability? Is it 1%, 3 to 5%, or 8 to 16% of the population? So I see 15 people voted already. Manuela, so you have to go to the link I put in the chat if you want to take part. So it's not directly within Zoom, but it's within your browser. Okay, I see people took part and the results are in. So most of you said 8 to 16% have a disability, which is correct. So it's at least 15%, and I will cover this in more detail. But usually, so you already have had some probably experiences. Many people, don't have so many touch points with people with disabilities, so that sometimes they are smaller, these groups. So leaderboard, Kika was the fastest to answer. Next question. How many people with disabilities have their disability from birth? Almost nobody, some, 2/3, or almost all of them. So think of the people who have a disability right now. How many were born with it? So now you have your browser window open and 33 people already took part, which is really cool. And if you haven't used this before, I see 45 people have. It's still time to click the link because I will ask you some more questions later and it's more fun. So now, okay, onto the results. So you guessed that of the people with disabilities, 2/3 have them since birth. But the correct answer is almost nobody is born with the disability. Most of the people acquire their disability throughout their life through illnesses and injuries. And aging basically is something. So it's just 3% who are born with a disability, and other than people think. So you can even consider that we are all temporarily non-disabled, so that so bad news is you might be disabled tomorrow or in the future, or have a relative who has this. So it's not these are the disabled people and the others are the non-disabled, or we are the non-disabled, but it's actually all of us and could be all of us. So Giovanni was second fast. So is it mandatory to make your services accessible? Yes, no, or it depends. Let's say in the European Union. And think of digital services, maybe, your apps and websites, but maybe just a hunch. It's just a little game. And this is also the last question. So the results are in. So most of you think, 2/3 think that it is mandatory to make your services accessible. And the correct answer is more likely it depends. So speaking of digital accessibility, especially, yes, there are some websites have to be accessible, websites and apps, but only those of public bodies like the government, for example. And even they struggle to be accessible, to be honest. And for private parties and private companies and organizations, there is a new regulation coming in next year. But even this will not make, for example, physical accessibility mandatory in the European Union. And I will come to this later on. I'm happy that my hunch is that you, as an artist, basically are usually always like, let's put it that way. So as artists, you can do what you want because it's art. So I hope that you are here because you're interested in accessibility. And but art, the freedom of art goes a long way. So you have your freedom of expression first, but of course you should consider people, all audiences, people with disabilities. But for government sites, for example, where it's mandatory to have access to, I don't know, border control or ordering, doing official things with the government, it of course has to be mandatory. And this is a European regulation. This is not a regulation talk today, so no worries. And this was the last question for now. Thank you a lot. One thing I wanted to show you. So you can keep this open and there's room for audience Q&A. So I will stop the poll. And what you can type in is you can send a question and I will go through questions you might have. So there are no questions right now. So but maybe somebody can just try it out, type in test in the question. So there should be on your phone something like audience Q&A. So see, and Marcelo did it. Thank you. So this is what it will see. And then I can say, okay, I answered the question and then it's gone. So this is the room for questions and you can ask questions anytime. Please do it here because I cannot see the chat so nicely. And for people who are using screen readers and who cannot see, it's more distracting. So do it here. Yeah, so there are already these questions. I will collect them for now. So type them in right now. I will see them. But first I will do a small introduction. And then I will come back to your questions. So thanks again for introducing us. My name is Holger. I'm part of Sozialhelden. It means social heroes in German, pun intended. And we are a group of people with and without disabilities. We are funded 19 years ago. We are roughly 20 people. Here you see a group photo of us, and some people are using wheelchairs, some using a long stick. One colleague of mine is blind, for example, and some people are standing together in a group. And our motto is making things happen. So we do a lot of projects, not all around disability and mainstream and inclusion, but it happened to be that way because our founder, Raoul Krauthausen, he's in the lower right corner and he's using an electric wheelchair. And he's a good friend of mine. We studied at the University of Arts in Berlin together. So I'm also a designer by education, but here I do this now full time, and I'm a board member of the charitable organization of this nonprofit organization, and I'm a consultant for inclusion and accessibility, and a co-founder of wheelmap.org, which I will show you in a second. And I consider myself an ally to people with disabilities. So I don't have a lived experience of disability myself. And all I can do is proxy to bring this information from my colleagues and from all things I've learned as a non-disabled person, about to a better understanding on what disability means and actually how can you make your services accessible. So of course I cannot imagine what it is to have a disability because I don't have it. But what I can offer today is to give you this perspective of the things I've learned. And one thing I've learned while hanging out with my friend Raul was that when you use an electric wheelchair, it's hard to get into places. Berlin has a lot of old buildings and they have steps at the entrance when you go to a coffee shop, for example. So we built an app for that. So we built wheelmap.org, and here's a screenshot of an iPhone app, which is also available on Android and iOS and the web, where you actually it's just a map where you can find places which are accessible or not accessible. So it's green for fully accessible, yellow for somewhat, and red for inaccessible. And everybody can contribute. So this is how we started. And 12 years ago with this, or 13 years ago with this app, and people can just like tap places and color them, basically say it's green because it's wheelchair accessible, and I can take a photo of the place, and I can see more details sometimes. For example, do the elevators at this train station work right now? But it's mostly crowdsourced, so people like you can just, wherever they are, contribute information. And the idea is if we just knew some coffee shops or, I don't know, swimming pools or, I don't know, drugstores or whatever, we can actually, get around more with wheelchairs and find our ways better. And what happened is that lots of people liked the idea. So there are more than 2.5 million rated places now, which makes it the largest open database in the world for this, more than 100,000 photos, and we are online in 33 languages. And what I put on this map here is a dot wherever we have a place. And if you put your eyes together a little bit, you can see a world map. Because there are so many places, and you see it's clustered within Europe and in Japan and also in the US. It's partly due to population and partly due to how popular this mapping service is in these regions. And also, since we are from Europe, there's a lot of coverage in Europe. So you feel free to open the app or just type in wheelmap.org in your browser and see, where in your neighborhood is an accessible bakery, or maybe you know of places which are accessible or inaccessible and can quickly mark some places. But I hope I don't bore you too much that you do this on the side. So let's go and get on to today's agenda. So when you want to learn about digital accessibility and how can you make your service accessible, I suggest that we first discuss about what is actually a disability and how can what does it entail? And then we will discuss how can we avoid digital barriers. And then I'll also show you some tools. So I type in your tool time, and also, of course, we have time for questions in this 90 minutes. And first I start quickly about what is a disability. So of course, there's regulation about definitions about this. I brought one from Germany because I'm German. So the definition of the German social code, so the German law, is people with disabilities are people who have physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments that may prevent them from participating on equal terms for more than 6 months. So let's quickly unpack this. So people with disabilities, there are certain aspects. So they say physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory, and these are impairments, and they prevent them from taking part in daily life for a longer time. So this is the usual definition. So there are some things. So people are different, people are diverse, and a disability is something which gets in the way from interacting with the world or with other people. And so you see already different wordings. So there's disability, there's impairment. What does this mean? I'll go to this in a minute. But first, like, how many people are these? I already, in the quiz you saw, it's more than 15, 16%, some people say. So the United Nations, so the World Health Organization, they say it's 1 billion people in the world. I think it's actually 1.3 billion. It's not within a new study of them who have a disability, which makes it 13% of the world's population. So we are 80 people here. So there are 8, 9 people with a disability in this room. If this group would be a representation of the population. It's usually not the case because people with disabilities experience a lot of discrimination. And to get here where you are right now might have been a challenge for people with disability, maybe even more so than not. For example, you might not have English as a mother tongue. I don't. My mother tongue is German. And learning a different language means you have to have access to school education. And this might be still a problem even in Europe. For example, if you're deaf, if you cannot hear, to get adequate education, to read and write and learn a different language. And also, we don't have sign language interpreters here. I asked Giovanni beforehand. He told me nobody who signed up for this is deaf. So that's why we don't have this here. Yeah, so you see the numbers on my chart in the European Union. The numbers are lower, a bit. So you see, it's a bit difficult to get the statistics out of these. In Germany, there are also statistics who say 7% and some say 10%. And also, people don't always self-report on disability. You know, you don't have to say that you have a disability. In Germany, you get some benefits, or no, it's not benefits. It's I'm Nachteilsausgleich. I'm lacking the English words, so that you get, you know, certain rights to enable you to participate more. You know, as like a little card where it says you have a disability. So you can sit on the special seat on the train, for example, but not all people with a disability get one. So thinking about disability in the history, it's like, you know, the older image, and I have here 3 photos on the slide, and the left one says Krankenhaus, which means hospital. So this is an old perspective on disability, so that people have a disability, they are disabled, there's something wrong with them, so to say. So they maybe are, you know, have a deficit, something. It's basically the focus of this older wording was on the individual. You know, it's their problem that they cannot do is maybe we can be nice to them and put them somewhere where they can be happy, but they're not part of our society. So this is the old perspective, and this has changed drastically in the past couple of decades. And it's not this medical image now, like what's wrong with this person, but more the acknowledgement that that disability is the medical model. Thanks, Angela. And today it's more the perspective is the social model and the human rights model. So the social model means, and I put here on the right more photos of protests and people doing stuff together, is that disability is not the individual, but we all are diverse, we all are different, and that it's the job of the whole society to be inclusive. So to put it for an example, you know, if you want to ride a bus, you don't have to bring your own ramp, but the bus or service, they have to provide an accessible access so that when you're using a wheelchair, for example, that you can take part equally. So it's not your fault that there's a steps at the entrance, but it's society's fault that there are still steps and not elevators everywhere or ramps. So sticking with this image right now. And this is also the human rights perspective, where the United Nations, they have special legislation where they say that it is a human right to have access and to participate equally. And this has been signed by almost all of the United Nations members. So bringing it together, so there are different words around. So impairment means that it's likely the acknowledgement that people are different. So if you are missing an arm, you just don't have an arm, which is an impairment to you because you are not normative like people usually are. But does it disable you from participating? It only disables you from participating if there's a barrier. If you, for example, there's, a special, I don't know, if you want to open, I don't know, a glass or something, and you need both hands because the design is in a way where the designer said, like, you always need two hands. So, and this is where barriers come into place. So, my colleague always says, like, when I'm using a wheelchair, I have an impairment, I cannot walk, but but I'm only disabled, but I'm not disabled when I'm sitting with you at a table because we are both sitting. That's nothing happening, but I'm disabled when I need to, go to the second floor to see the doctor's office and there's no elevator. Then I experience a barrier which disables me from going to this doctor, So basically, think about this, that it's all the job of our all to accommodate for everybody, and it makes also the design better. It's called universal design, where you think more broadly about the people you want to reach, about the people who experience your art, and this will probably make your product, your art, better. And this is what I want to advocate for here. So inclusion, which means including everybody, is not a charity, it's a human right, and it's not a nicety towards people with disabilities. And here you see a photo of a German demonstration, and this woman is holding a sign saying human rights now in German. This was from a demonstration a couple of years back. So now we know what a disability is and what it feels. So now, how can we avoid digital barriers? And I'm asked to focus here on digital accessibility and accessible communications. Of course, everything is communication and things of this, but I think what will help us today is to think about a website or a social media post or an email or a short message you're sending through WhatsApp, so that we just focus on things which are in front of us right now, like a computer or your phone. And I brought some, how I will do this is I will introduce you to different forms of impairments people might have. And they might sometimes sound a little bit cliche, but it helps you to shift perspective when you think, okay, I'm building a social media post right now or a website. So what should I consider once Holger, I will describe the impairment, the disability, and then you will simultaneously think about, how could I accommodate for this? How can I make this a good experience for a person who has this kind of disability? And as a little extra, what I brought is a different medium, like not just a phone or a computer, but just to show you some examples how companies can accommodate for this. I bring then a short example of the Apple Vision Pro, which is a virtual reality headset by Apple. It's hugely expensive, and I'm not really sure how useful this will be. It's announced. It's just like a fancy new thing for us today to show like how does a company who has infinite amount of money and resources, how do they communicate? How can they make such a device accessible? Okay, so just like as a small aside. So the impairments I will be covering are visual impairments, motor impairments, hearing impairments, cognitive impairments, and neurodivergence. So, and I will quickly go through each of them. And while I describe what this is, you will go back to Slido and type in some words on what barriers might be. Sounds good? Okay, so let me quickly go back here. I already see some questions. Let's go through them now. So how about people with learning disabilities? This will be cognitive, is cognition. So we will talk about this. How many people don't know they are disabled? Yeah, good question. Wilrap, thanks. Okay. So exactly what will be, so Paula asked exactly what will be do as services on an artist web accessible? I think how can you make it accessible is I think what you think. This is what I hopefully will be covering. So I'm a young person with Down syndrome, and I would like to know if you do any work with people with learning disabilities. Yes, we do. I actually have a colleague with a learning disability. And so Sven, he's often part of the session. He's not here today, but yes, we do. And also we help them, for example, with employment. How can they work outside of sheltered workplaces, for example? And we coach usually companies on how to work more with people with learning disabilities. So yes, we do things with this. So yeah, how about integrated? We will cover this. So I will now start the poll again. And so the first thing I will do, and you go back to the link, you should still have it in your chat. What barriers might people with visual disabilities encounter? And I will quickly describe what this could be. So what I have on screen here is 3 photos, and the left one is a ship. And on the left-hand side of this, you see a clear, sharp image, and on the right-hand side, it's gray and blurry. And I wrote cataract down below, which is an eye disease, and this is a simulation of something who has this. It's grauer Star in German. I don't know other language words. So if you think of a visual impairment, it might not be directly that you don't see anything, but it might be that you see things blurry or gray. And in the middle, you see flowers, and the left hand has all colors, and the right hand side is missing the color red. So, and I wrote down color vision deficiencies. Um, so so there are different types of color vision deficiencies. Some don't see colors at all. Some see different combinations of colors. And yeah, so this is one other aspect of a visual impairment. And sometimes if there are people, and it's I think 3 or 4% of the male population who have a red-green vision deficiency. So we are 80 people here, so there's maybe 1 or 2 men here who can't see the difference in the center image. And on the right-hand side, I have a photo of hands on a notebook with a Braille keyboard, a special keyboard in front of it, and I wrote blindness there. So Braille is a touch interface with these little dots, and you can, there are digital versions of these keyboards where you can read and write in Braille, for example. Yeah. But you can also use these different things. So what my barriers of people are when they're using digital services, when they cannot see, or when they cannot see colors, or when they cannot see clearly. So let's go there. So I see, being unable to read. Yeah, you cannot see text then. So usually what happens then is that you use a screen reader, which I can show you. Small text might be a problem. Similar colors might be a problem. Pictures might be a problem, definitely. I will come to this. And only able to hear, or different legibility of fonts, and also pictures, and if stuff is small, and color. Yes. So I brought a small demo of my colleague Marie. Usually I bring this, but it's in German, so I brought a different version where you can quickly see what a screen reader is. A screen reader is a computer software which is pre-installed on all phones and on all computers, what you're having right now. And it reads out everything which is on the computer so that you don't need to look at it. And I'll share my screen again to have just a second to show the video, optimized for video. And it will just be a couple of seconds. I'm lost in my, so I'll share my screen again with audio. and for video clips. So, so this is a short. So you should see a screen now of a website, and if I click play, there's an audio starting of a machine which reads what's on the screen. Let's do this for a couple of seconds, and then I will explain.
VoiceOver on Safari, accessibility test, yellow dig window. Well,
oops, sorry. Let's do it again.
VoiceOver on Safari, accessibility test, yellow dig window, accessibility test, yellow dig web content as keyboard focus, form controls menu, open account menu, C0 new notification, view my point details button. You are currently in a VoiceOver menu. This is a list of VoiceOver menu options. View my point details button. Participation grade, 1.25 weekly points, 125 out of 10,000.
So what you have seen now is this was a VoiceOver for Mac in this case, and they opened a website, and on the lower left side you can also see like what's said out loud in print, and it actually not only reads what's on the screen, but also what kind of element this is. So that this is a menu section, that this here has headlines and so on. Let's go further down maybe and see here, for example, it starts with the content. Just a couple seconds.
To your Yellow Dig community. Heading level 3. Welcome to your Yellow Dig community. Visited link. Samuel Kempa, owner, 09/20/2019, edited yesterday at 4:01 p.m. EDT. Clapping hands. We're glad you're here. Clapping hands. In Yellow Dig, we want real conversations to take place that help.
So what you saw is like the user clicked tab to go from element to element, and the screen reader read that this was a type of a headline, this is a subtitle, this is an emoji, and it says the emoji is clapping hands, and then it starts reading these paragraphs. And this gives you a good representation on what actually, what's happening on the screen. But so the difficult part is that this website has to be programmed in a way that this is actually possible. And this is most of the work I usually do with software developers to explain that that this title here, that it needs to be declared as a title. So like in Word, when you say this is of a type headline, and it's not just like 20 pixels and bold, so that people can see that it looks like a headline, but you actually have to make it a headline in the code. So if you do things the default way, how websites are, for example, WordPress, this is usually fine. But if you want to do things special, it's usually more work, and you have to understand that you don't break things so that screen readers like this still work. And this is maybe for now, yeah, enough for the screen reader demo. And let's go on to the next. So, or maybe I show you what I wanted to do with you now, and this now for the meeting chat, is like as you said, whatever you're doing visually cannot be seen by people who are blind. So what you need to do is you need to describe what's happening. And this goes for video, but this also goes for photos. And when you post an image on social media, for example, you have to describe it. It's called an alternative text. This alternative text is the alternative to looking at the image. What I usually say is like, think of somebody, you're on the phone with somebody and you want to describe what this image is. And I brought an image here. This is an image I'm showing right now. I'm not describing it. I'm describing all my videos, my presentations. But for the sake of this exercise, I want you now to describe this just in like in maybe 100 characters or less, like a tweet or shorter. Just describe what you're seeing here, and it should not be the subtitle. It should just describe what's actually visible and what's helpful here. So please do this now and just type your version in the chat, and then we'll go through it real quick. Or I give you some options. So if this is too hard, there's a second photo you're seeing, and also I have a third one. And you can choose, so you type 1, 2, and 3, and then space, and then you just type in the description if you think this one is too much. So just do an alternative text for one of these photos, and I'll wait.
We do it in the Zoom chat.
Yes, yeah, just
Okay.
just post it in the Zoom chat.
Okay.
So think you maybe do a blog post or something, and this is one of the photos. And it could be a bit longer, by the way, not just one word. Yeah, but I see people, maybe those who are finished made it short. Now they are coming all in. Okay. Okay, so there are still things coming in. I cannot read them all. Thanks a lot for participating. I will read some. So, for example, so Rita, for example, she said, view of a city with high buildings and Christmas lights is for one. Or, and two is a person crying next to the bed. And yeah, that's what I see without my glasses. Yeah, Evelyn, you're right. This is what I'm talking about with visual disabilities. And Mala described the first image as nocturnal image of a cathedral at night. There is some color lights. Maybe it's Christmas. It looks like a big city with high rises. Yeah, historic church in a modern setting at Advent time, Christmas lights in Berlin. So these are excellent descriptions, and also for the second, a woman sitting on a bedroom floor crying. You can see an unmade bed in the background. Nika, this is also excellent, describing what can be seen here. It's unclear, of course, and the thing I didn't tell you before is one, it's not that difficult, just do it. You can, and you can do it in your social media posts, for example, or in your blog post. Please do this from now on. It's in all these interfaces. If you right click on a PowerPoint or if you go through social media, you can add alternative text. It's called alt text. And this already helps a lot to get the context. But of course, the context is why you're posting this image. I didn't tell you like what was this image about. And of course, this can be very, very different. But it's really cool. I'm really happy of the results. All I'm reading here. As you know, make it objective. Don't put interpretation into the picture. Just describe what's seen here. And this is really cool. Yeah. Thanks for this. Here's a small summary of the first one. So the adaptations for people with visual impairments is everything which has no text must have text so that it can be read aloud, or with this braille line. And check how your products, apps, and websites look with different color vision deficiencies. I'll show you an example later. Ensure high contrast so that you know that it's good, it's discernible, that you can see this. So this is not a light gray text I'm putting here, but it's dark gray on white so that I have enough contrast. And add audio description to videos. So when you cannot see, but something is happening in the video, which is important, you need a voiceover, like a voice line which describes what's happening. And also you have your app sites and webs checked so that they work with screen readers, because it's a bit difficult. And just quickly to go back to the Apple Vision Pro, so yes, they also have voiceover. So it has like the highest resolution screens in front of your eyes, but they designed it in a way that you don't have to see to use it, because it has also spatial audio, so you know around, and it has voiceover. So if the app developers for this device program it correctly, they can describe all these things which are happening there. So let us quickly go to question time again. So stop this. So how about people with learning disabilities? I said I will come to this. Many people. So there are no new questions, if I see this correctly. Exactly what will be doing services to artist websites accessible? It says that this is one of the aspects. Okay. So let's go to the next one, motor impairments. And I'll turn on the live pulse again while I'm describing. So just a second. So that you can enter words and keywords, what barriers might people with motor disabilities encounter, especially when using digital services. So think about the website and the app as well. And motor impairments is like on the left-hand side, I put a photo of my co-founder of Wheelmap. He's using a wheelchair. But a motor impairment can also be if you're using walking aids, like in the photo in the middle, where you don't have your hands free, for example. But it could also be trembling hands, like on the right side, there's a photo of hands of an old woman sitting on using the notebook, a computer. And let's see what you wrote down. Small buttons might be a problem. Speed, fine motor skills, unstable roads. Yes. Gross motor skills. Yes, which is absolutely correct. And handling these kind of disabilities in a digital manner means that you should support keyboard control and other input devices, not just the mouse. And I forgot to say this in the beginning, but of people who are blind, also, they don't use the mouse. They don't click on things. They just use the keyboard. So this is crucial and essential. And sometimes people are using special keyboards, maybe clickers and things like this. But all you need to know is the computer, the phone will see this as a keyboard entry. So has to work. And this is all you need to worry about. You know, not all these special devices people have, but they will be keyboards. And also use large buttons, because if things are, as you said, like too fast and shaky, you know, if the buttons are big, you can tap them with your phone, and and it's easier. Use app, I'm not really sure, but it's maybe just a special thing. Is Braille used for computer keyboards? Yeah, there are special Braille devices where you can read and write in Braille as well. But the computer will just see this as an external keyboard, basically, or you as a website user or app user on your phone, you will not know this. So as long as you support a keyboard, Braille will be okay for people who are using Braille. Okay, going on. The keyboard control, you just saw this in the demo. One other thing on the Apple Vision Pro, you control this device with gestures. When you cannot move your hands, you cannot gesture. So what they do is they have dwell control, which means with the eyes, people can look at things, and the longer they look at this, they will be selected. So you can control the computer or this Apple Vision Pro thing, but it also works with computers, and just by looking at things for a certain amount of time, which is then actually the mouse, by the way, and also a keyboard, which is displayed on the computer. So different things are working. Going through the next impairment I want to describe to you, and go, and again, what barriers might people with hearing disabilities encounter? So stay with me and click the links. I'll quickly describe what is a hearing impairment. So one is, it can be hearing loss, so that people cannot hear as well. I myself had a hearing aid for a couple of years on my left ear, and then I got surgery and I don't need it anymore. But I can describe that it was hard to follow a conversation in a restaurant with my wife, for example, or on the bus. I was always sitting on the left side of her because I could hear better on my right ear. So this is one aspect of hearing. And also deafness is when you don't hear anything at all. It's total hearing loss. One thing which is important to know is that some people who are deaf, they use sign language. And it's not just one sign language in the world, but each language in the world has a sign language. So for example, German sign language is different from Austrian sign language, or British sign language is different from American sign language. It's a cultural thing as well. There are also people who are deaf and who don't have understand sign language. You have to learn this for a couple of years. But there are also people who are deaf who are not really able to read and write that well because they have been discriminated in school, in education, because they should read lips. Spoiler, it's impossible to read lips. It's not working. So, and if you have your whole education and you don't have anybody signing with you, you might not even learn how to read and write. So the illiteracy rate of people who are deaf is pretty high. So it's unfortunately sometimes, you need to, so people need sign language in their devices because this is their mother tongue. This is what they learned first, and this is also what they're most confident in. So what barriers might people who have hearing disabilities encounter? So you wrote they cannot hear audio from the videos, which is absolutely correct. What you do then is you have subtitles for people who can read and sign language interpretation in the video for people who read sign. Indistinct speech, if you're in hearing disability, yes. Hearing cars, yes, it can be a challenge. So the whole being aware of the surrounding, which means if you only rely on one sense, like on audio, for example, there's a fire alarm and it only has an audio. It's a siren. There's a noise because there's a fire alarm. It's not enough if you cannot hear. So you need something visual as well, like something which is blinking, so that people can see that there's an alarm. And the same goes for websites as well. Always have two different senses which people can use, like seeing or hearing or reading aloud on screen readers, for example. Yes, let's go on with this. So if you create digital experiences, don't use background music, don't use autoplay on things because they are distracting. Offer subtitles and transcripts. If you have video content, offer videos in sign language. This is expensive, unfortunately, so get a grant for that. And always have these two senses principle, be available not only by phone, but also by SMS, for example, and consider these things. I can quickly show you some signs. For example, if I type in tree here, it's German, I think. So what you see on screen now, this is spreadthesign.com, which is a sign language dictionary. And you see the image of a woman making the German sign for tree, for Baum. And this is the English version here. So you see, they are not similar. Both can represent this. And there's also Russian, for example, which is more like the German one, I would say, Turkish, and so on. So I post this in the chat if you want to play with this and go on. To see how different this is. And for the Apple Vision Pro, they also have captions, so that if you cannot hear, you can have this 3D experience and just read what's happening. So to the second last, cognitive impairments. And I again ask you to go through, I turn on the questionnaire again. So what barriers might people with cognitive disabilities encounter? You're already typing, thanks. Let me quickly describe what I mean. So basically, what my colleague Sven always says, he prefers to say learning difficulties. So, and what you see is a photo of two women at a reception with glasses, and they're doing a selfie. And one of the models, one of the women, she has the Down syndrome, which is usually what people think about when they think about learning difficulties and cognitive impairments. It can have very different forms, of course. This is a little bit cliche, but this is one of these things. What is meant in terms of a disability is people who struggle with complicated sentences and words and might not and follow complex things, and which results in not having a higher school education, maybe, or speaking different languages, as we said in the beginning. And yeah, and just needing things easier. What's interesting is that people with cognitive impairments in Germany, for example, are like 300,000 people. But people who cannot read German or who cannot hardly read any German in Germany is 6 million. So, and these might be people who are learning German, but these might be people who are just illiterate and cannot read. So, and they also benefit from the same adaptations you could do to accommodate for people with cognitive impairments. So think of these different things. What might be barriers? You wrote a lot of things, yeah. Difficult texts is definitely a struggle. Lack of explanations, signs with symbols, lack of visual supports. So it's a good idea what you're already doing when you say, like, don't just use words, also show pictures, because pictures are nice, and videos. That's actually one thing my colleague always says. Yes, you can use simple language, but I prefer a YouTube video, you know? So, because he's learning to read, but it's difficult for him. And distracting colors, reading the news in general, taking time is one thing. So yeah, it's definitely things, concentration. Yes, all these things. See, it's not that difficult. That's my whole goal. So what you can do is you can use Easy English or plain English. And Easy English is a version of English which is made specifically easy for people who have trouble understanding complex things. And plain English means you're just trying to write more easily, and as I'm trying to use easier, like normal English, and don't use complicated words. But if you write things down, there's an even more easy version, which is called Easy English. And there's also these things in German and in other languages as well. Yeah, use videos, images, and symbols to explain, not just text, so that people can see this who don't speak the language or who cannot read. And avoid captures, these challenges, like proof that you are human on a form, for example. That's a problem. And also give people time to use this thing which you have built. It might be a form, it might be an interaction, something. There shouldn't be a countdown, there shouldn't be time pressure, because maybe people take longer to read this or to understand what you're doing. And yeah. So Easy English is, I'll skip, has some rules to this. I'll skip this now in terms of times. And one other example to make it easier for people with cognitive impairments is here in the Apple Vision Pro. It's called guided access. So that you can lock the device, that it only works with this one app, for example, so that people don't accidentally activate something on the device and change the app. So it's easier for them to use. So the next, neurodivergence. And again, what barriers might people with neurodivergence encounter? This is a complicated word. So what do I mean with this? So neuro means neuro in the brain, the nerves. I'm not a doctor or anything. I just try to describe the word. And divergent means being being different in different ways. I like the English words right now. And one thing what people think about is autism. And I put here on the right side this symbol, the self-designated symbol of people with autism, which is like the infinity symbol with a rainbow colors in it, which means autism is a spectrum. So it can be many different things. This is what a spectrum means. And the way people with autism explained it to me is that think of the brain being wired differently than what I experience. And a friend of mine, she told me that it's like, Holger, imagine that you're experiencing everything with the same at the same time with the same level, so that she was not able to just like focus on some things, but there was like, I don't know, a garbage truck going by outside and it had the same importance in her brain than our conversation. And so she had to concentrate a lot to follow the conversation. So that was one example of her. It could also be HDHD, HDHS, and other things which might be similar to these kind of things. And this is the way I'm describing it right now. I put other definitions here, or not because they could be neurologically divergent. For example, epilepsy. Here on the left-hand side, you see like a party setting with lights and strobes and smoke and things like this. This can actually give you an epileptic seizure, so that you might fall down and cramp and maybe hit your head on the floor when a strobe, for example, comes. This might trigger your epilepsy. So don't do these kind of things, without warning people beforehand. And this is something which happens in the brain. This is why I put it here. So it's not neurodivergence per se. I just put it here. The same goes for depression, which means in your brain something works in a way which makes you feel more depressed. It's also not really neurodivergence. I put in a black and white photo of a woman holding her knees and being down, which how can you encounter, the app you're building or the website or the form you have to fill out? It's more difficult for you when you have a depression. These are 3 different things, just to be very clear on these things. But these might all have, hinder you from using apps which are not considering this. So what might barriers be? Flashing lights, bright lights, mixed signals, problem person. I don't really know what that is. Working full day jobs might be a problem. Yes, definitely. Too many colors, fonts, distractions, concentrating, problems leaving your home. So how could you adapt for these things? Dull colors, distractions, problems in being in contact with other people. What do you see? Social media toxic circles. Okay, I'm looking for things which are more on the digital side, like loud sounds, for example, noise, attention, high-pitched sounds, irony. Yeah, it never works on the internet, but here especially. Yeah, mixed signals, energy in general. This is what they all have in common. And so what can you do when you build an app or website or something digital? Well, you should pay attention to clear structure. So that you structure your content, make clear what are the steps which need to be done, so that it's easy and one by one to go through these things. And don't make it something people need to explore necessarily. Make it easier. Avoid fast animations and strobe flashes, as we said. Avoid parallax effects. I'll show you an example where things are animated, and pay attention to legible fonts. So there are fonts which are easier to read and fonts which are harder to read, which I show you, give you a link to something where you can check this. So a negative example, what are parallax effects? This is what I mean by this. Now you see an animation of a demo website, and things are jumping in and zooming out, and you're getting dizzy with these kind of things. So I'll skip this. And so don't do this. And for the Apple Vision Pro, for example, there's an option in this device where you can say you want to reduce motion. And for example, here's like a 360 immersive experiences of a lake where you can go and watch a movie in front of. And you can, if you say you want reduced motion, the lake is not, the waves are not moving. It's a static image. And because it's not distracting you from the movie you're watching on this lakeside with this virtual reality experience. Just to show like how you can adapt digital things to be not so distracting. So these were the different disabilities I'm showing you. And lastly, of course, it's not these different kinds of disabilities that people have this and this disabilities. It's a spectrum. It's called the persona spectrum. So these disabilities might be permanent, temporary, or situational, and they might be all at once or a combination of many. So, you know, people, for example, might not be able to look at the message on your phone because they are driving right now, but it could also be because they are blind, you know, so, or they can only do things with one hand because they maybe just have one hand, but maybe they have an injury and they will heal and then they have two hands again. So it's a spectrum of people using these things, and many more people are benefiting, of course, of all these things than just people with disabilities. And just keep in mind that I went through one by one, but of course the world is not like that. You know, you're a little bit more this and struggle a little bit with this, and might have multiple disabilities at once. Just keep this in mind. So maybe let's go to questions, audience questions. What about the digital divide? Asks Mala. And please type in more questions right now. We can also open the microphone, of course, now. The digital divide, you mean, Mala, by people who don't have access to digital things in general? Yes, this is of course also on the wording of accessibility, but my job today was to talk about empathy on people with disabilities. Of course, people who cannot access digital things. You know, it's a whole different topic. Basically, also making your app easier is a good idea. And a lot of people have smartphones today. Also, they might just have older and slower smartphones. For example, this is one thing you can adapt. Don't make it cutting bleeding edge so that you need $1,000 device. And then, yeah, I would suggest just do this. And also give options. You know, if you have an event, make it in person and digital at the same time so that people can just come, and people who cannot come can take digitally, maybe take part over the phone, for example. How can we avoid people with learning disabilities to fall behind with technology? Well, design for them as well. And also, I'm not really sure if it's all black and white, to be honest. So because there are things now which might help if you have a learning disability, for example, that you can get a summary in more easy language, maybe through ChatGPT, or somebody can create this or can create more versions. So if you wrote a text, for example, you can have ChatGPT give a simplified version of this, and then you read this through, proofread this, because AIs are hallucinating. But it's faster to make more versions and easier versions of this, for example. Also subtitles and things like this work with AI. And so maybe technology can help bring this down a little bit more, you know, and make this more. And also maybe, for example, reading aloud is a good technology. So speech synthesis, that computers speak things, this voice has got significantly better in the past. So you can just have on your computer them read the text and it sounds better. So these are, I'm not so pessimistic on people falling behind. What resources can we provide people with learning disabilities? Resources, well, you need the resources to adapt for them. So as I said, make an easier version of these things, or make a video with the invitation to the event and not just a text. This could be helpful to just consider different means of communicating. Is there an internationally unified sign language? Yes, there is. But as a professor of sign language explained to me, it's just like it's not everybody speaks it. It's mostly like at the United Nations, where this is where I met her, and it conveys only 40–50% of the things you can say. So it's not really the Esperanto we were looking for, and people still prefer also culturally the sign language they grew up with. So if you grew up with a Finnish sign language, this is also a different language, the unified sign language. So it's called international sign language. So it's not as widely spread as we would wish. And this is also culturally how things adapt and change as well. It's not just a language, it's also a culture. What about people who are blind and deaf? Yes, there are different options what they can do. For example, some people who are blind and deaf, they can talk, for example, and they can read Braille. So you can type to them. There's a famous author, Haben Gilmer from the United States. She's an attorney. She is blind and deaf, and she wrote a book about her journey. And she once met the former President Barack Obama, and she was holding a Braille line where she could read Braille. And President Obama was typing on a keyboard with her, so he was chatting with her basically, and so she could understand what he was saying to her, and then she could talk because she learned how to speak. So there are different ways on integrating, and technology, she also wrote in her book, helped a lot. How can we provide access and support for digital technology? Support for technology, I think we're in pretty good times because, as I said, things like a screen reader, they are for free and they are on Android and iOS and Windows and Mac, and there are tutorials online where you can use these kind of things. So I think it's not hindering so much anymore, because in the past you needed a prescription, it was thousands of euros and dollars. I think it's getting better, to be honest. So to support, and also if you're designing digital products, keep in mind that you keep them simple and don't and if you consider adding more stuff to it, ask people with disabilities, is it still usable for them? So that's another thing. How can we open our digital platforms for all people with all kind of different disabilities to take part? I'm not sure what your digital platforms are, but if you're talking about social media platforms, for example, they are accessible. People are there. And if you, for example, post a photo in Instagram, you should think of adding an alternative text to this, because otherwise, for blind people, it's not discernible. And this is more the point that, all the users should broaden their perspective and do these kind of things. Giovanni, you're stopping me when I'm over time, to be honest. So maybe what we can do is, yeah. I heard there's an optical reader where people with mechanical disabilities can use their eyes to coordinate the cursor. Yes, there's an optical reader, as I described. So it's just like it's eye tracking, basically. It's not so expensive anymore. How can people with any kind of disabilities have a seat at the table to take part in digital communication, digital technologies as well? That's what we try to do, to be honest. So we try to work on standards, on international standards, and my colleagues with disabilities are sitting on these tables to discuss this. And I think the large companies and bodies have understood this. There's nothing about us without us. So that people with disabilities are the ones who define what works for them, and not people who don't experience these kinds of impairments. And that's the way to go. And that's also the direction regulation goes. And this is also why these large companies are complying. How can we educate people with any kind of disabilities on digital communication? Well, who are we? I think we should educate everybody. And in the same way, everybody should be educated to use digital communication. And I don't see the difference so much. So maybe this is all I can say for now for this. So I promised tool time. I lost track of time a little bit. Giovanni, how much time do we have?
Sorry, we have kind of 10 minutes ish, like between 5 and 10 minutes.
Okay, I will. This will work. Just a second. I just lost my presentation. So it's maybe also a good time for me stopping speaking. I was talking so much. So here we go. I'm sharing my screen again. So I brought some tools which you can use when you develop digital apps or websites. And one is if you make a website of any kind, or you want to test this website, maybe in WordPress or whatever, there's a free tool from Microsoft called Accessibility Insights for Web. What this is a browser plugin which gives you some recommendations on things which can be checked automatically. So things like color contrast, for example, of background and foreground, or missing alternative texts, or missing things. So just to get a rough idea on how bad is this website, basically, you can check this. But this is just for people who are into this. Usually you should ask somebody who knows how to write HTML and code a little bit. But just to show you that there are tools in browsers pre-built, but also this is a good one. I'll type in, you'll get the links later. It's called Accessibility Insights for Web. So I'll skip this. Another thing is color contrast analyzer, which is a native app which you can just install. It looks like this. And then you can just have this pipe and just say like, okay, this is the foreground and this is the background. And then you see the contrast ratio is 12.8 to 1. And the official one, and you see this green checks here, so it's good, it's enough contrast, so it should be 4.5 to 1. So that if you're not sure how good is the contrast, you can check it with these things. This is also pre-installed in Figma and in Sketch and in Photoshop and in these things. Just go and look for these things, checking contrast and colors. As I said, there are tools like Some AI, for example, which is a specialized AI just to make things easier in terms of language, that you have a complicated text and you paste it in the left and you translate it to more easy English. This is something I can recommend. Some AI costs money, unfortunately, but this is how they do it. It's a startup from Munich. And of course, the best way is to ask people with learning difficulties themselves to read through these things, and they can mark what they still don't understand. How to make videos accessible. We discussed this before. You can add subtitles. You can generate them automatically with YouTube, for example, and then proofread them and correct them. Add sign language, which is something you need to buy. It costs quite some money unfortunately, because not so many people are able to translate to sign language, but this is the way to go. There's no automatic way. And add audio description, which means describe the things which are just visually there and which don't have words, so that people can follow the story of your video. And also add transcripts, which means like the whole text as a text form, which people can download and maybe do separately. For audio description, what we like doing is have a text-to-speech tool where we type in what's visible. Like, I don't know, the man is opening a door or something, you know, so because this is important for the story. And then I type just on this website, ttsfree.com, the man is opening the door, and then I can download MP3 files, which are fast enough to fit in the video I have already edited. So I recommend you check this out. Then in terms of language, of words and texts, I recommend the German website leserlich.info, which has an English version. And what this does is it gives you, for example, a font size calculator, when you can see how far away are the people from the thing. Is it a poster, for example, or is it a tablet? And then it gives you approximation on how large your font should be. It also has recommendations on what kinds of fonts you should use, and I can, very much recommend this website. And yeah, we have more tools in terms of time. I think I'll stop here and generally go for more questions maybe. And definitely get people with disabilities into your teams. And if you don't know people with disabilities, work on that, you know, get to know them and make them part of your project, and they will explain to you what's needed, and it makes it much easier. So when Marie, for example, joined our team, this is my colleague who is blind, we learned a lot on, you know, in Slack and in WhatsApp to just describe the images we are posting, and learning more like what's needed that she can take part equally in our team. Same goes for Sven and also for other people in our team. And this makes the project and also the products we make better. Yeah, nothing about us without us. As I said, is, you know, the motto: ask the people with disabilities what they need, don't assume. And now just get started with every small step towards inclusion. This helps. And yeah, what I would recommend you, if you have a project right now, you can brainstorm what are your next steps. You know, what does all what you learned today have to do with your websites and social media, or with the content you create, or the designs you do, and maybe also with the processes and events you do. Like, how do you find, I don't know, candidates for what you're doing, or how do you invite people to events, and rethink this with this pattern I have given you today, you know, and collect them and just brainstorm what the next steps are. And usually there are always very easy things you can do to improve and to make these things more inclusive on what you're doing. Yeah, and having said that, I'll jump to the questions for one last time, or what we can do is also to jump to the one last thing I will do is I present this again and ask you, how confident do you feel now about the topic this 1.5 hours later? Maybe you give me a quick indication. So, and I'm happy to see that the bar is shifted to the right. I think in the beginning it was 6.0, the average score out of 10, and now it's 7.4. So I'm really happy that you have the impression that you feel more confident now. This was my goal. And this is also a journey to be in, to go on. And this concludes my presentation. And one last thing is for my presentation, what I've seen today here, I love to learn. I love to learn to get better. And please give me some anonymous feedback on sozialhelden.de/feedback. You can fill out a 1-question form, basically. I'll type it in the chat in a moment. And yeah, find us on social media. Email me at holger@sozialhelden.de. And I'm happy to work with you in the future, maybe. Thanks a lot.